Welcome to Hard Talk with me, Zainab Badawi. Does comedy have the power to transcend borders, religions and politics? And can it build bridges between different communities who may mistrust and misunderstand one another? Well, my guest today thinks so. He's one of the Arab world's most popular comedians, Nemr Abu Nassar. Brought up in the United States and Lebanon, he quit his job as an insurance broker to become a stand-up comic. He believes humour can change the world, but does he risk promoting misunderstanding and perpetuating stereotypes through his comedy? Nemr Abu Nassar, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there you were at the age of 5 in the United States watching television, and you decided there and then that you wanted to be either a stand-up comedian or a Ninja Turtle.
Yes.
Why not a Ninja Turtle?
Well, the stem cell research is not where it should be. And for religious reasons, I think a lot of people have opposed it. So I haven't given out hope yet. I'm using stand-up comedy to finance the Ninja Turtle dream.
All right.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
We'll see what happens. So you're Lebanese American. Your family
Yes.
moved to San Diego when you were 2 years of age because of the civil war at the time in Lebanon. And you went back to Lebanon when you were 10 years of age.
Yeah.
How important is this dual identity to you as a comic?
I think it gives me the only reason that I'm worth watching, really. It gave me that perspective because I'm equal parts Lebanese as I am equal parts American. I think they're two very interesting lives to live. You know, when you grow up in America, everything's given to you. There's stability. There's an infrastructure that's nurturing for a child to grow up in a very secure and safe environment. And then you take that child and transplant him into a post-Civil War Lebanon, and it's the polar opposite. You know, there is no infrastructure neither for children or anyone at the time when we got there, and it was after the Civil War. So you go from having a school where you had an ocean view and everything was nice and there were birds and everything to a country that has the ocean views, but there are bullet holes everywhere and stuff. So it was a jarring experience.
And so is that what made you, to use your own words, a purpose-driven comedian, and you want to actually build bridges between communities, the Arab world and the non-Arab world,
for
to create
me,
greater understanding?
I think the reason that it morphed into that is because I've had perfect harmony between my American and Arab side. I've never found that there is anything that couldn't be harmonious between the two. So when I see the lack of harmony between those two sides of the world, it surprises me. And I feel that using my comedy, I can easily reflect the harmony I have and bring them together, so why not?
But to be honest, do you think that that harmony that you express you have and being at ease in American society is to do with the fact that you are a Christian Arab?
I don't think so, because nobody in America thinks I'm Christian. Everybody in America presumes that I'm Muslim. So anytime I do TV or radio or whatever, they end up asking me questions as a Muslim. And I end up answering without telling them I'm Christian until the very end. And then usually because they'll be saying something critical of Islam. And I'll keep answering, and then at the very end, once they're convinced and the argument has been won, for lack of a better term, I then tell them, by the way, I'm Christian. And they usually say, why didn't you tell us earlier? And I said, I didn't want that to be the reason you would believe me. So
Well, you think they would look upon you less favorably?
No. If somebody's asking me,
if you were Muslim?
If somebody's asking me a question about Islam, and I say, well, first of all, I'm a Christian, I kind of feel like that's me saying, like, oh, I don't want you to associate me with Islam, which I wouldn't mind. I'd be more than proud to be associated with any religion. But I think
because your fiancée is, in fact,
she's Muslim. Yeah. You know, in Lebanon, we've killed each other for so long, and nobody won anything. And I think we realized that it's not working. So there is also a harmony. Nobody cares anymore. It's not about what religion you are. It's about who you are. You know, your religion doesn't define you. It's what you do as a religious person or not that defines you. So that realization comes to me naturally.
It's just when you say you want to promote greater understanding, and you have said Arabs have not been able to export our culture effectively to the West. But so much of that Arab culture in so many people's minds now, both in the Arab world and outside, has a lot to do with Islam, hasn't it?
Well, it does, but I think the beauty of Arab culture doesn't have to do with religion. I think religion is a reflection of Arab culture. That's what I've always thought.
But what is Arab culture? I mean, Lebanon, your native
Hospitality.
Lebanon. You see women wearing bathing suits on the beach.
And women
in parts of the Gulf, you see them covered up. I mean, what is Arab culture then?
Arab,
is there a uniform one?
No, Arab culture for me isn't a language, because I speak English fluently. We have people who speak Arabic only, people who speak English, and we're all of the same habits and customs. I think that the culture isn't a language, it isn't a religion. What it is the hospitality. For me, I've always defined Arabs as people who, when you walk into their home, it becomes your home. People who will always do something to make you feel at ease. If they're eating, you must join us for a meal. And for me, these are the things that have always been
what else
distinctive.
is there? We know that generosity, hospitality is a great virtue in the Arab
For me, I like
culture.
old school Arab culture of, honor and nobility, and there was pre-IS and ISIS and all of this kind of stuff when this was what we were branded as. When I first went to Lebanon from America, I was surprised at the spirit of the people. The Arab spirit is a spirit that refuses to be dominated, it refuses to be shut down. And in Lebanon, I always defined Lebanese people as people who, no matter how hard you push them down, they still would not collapse. And I think that's something that defines what an Arab is.
But a lot of people now, rightly or wrongly, define being Arab as being Muslim, and unfortunately there is a tiny minority amongst the Muslims who of course carry out acts of terror.
Yeah, of course.
And that for many people has become the defining feature.
Yeah, and
of
that's
what being
and
Arab
I
is.
blame Arabs for that, and I do that unapologetically. We don't push back. You see, in America, you have Timothy McVeigh, you got a bunch of white people who blow buildings up, who commit mass murders, who
And more people in the United States have died
much more.
In such
However,
acts.
they don't get branded under that. What we have a problem with as an Arab society is, and that's what you were just mentioning earlier that I said, is we don't export our culture today. Dominant. Obviously, our culture is exported in mathematics, sciences, our contributions cannot be denied, but nobody knows that. So we have a problem when some extremism comes out, we don't have an effective way of addressing it. We don't have a Seinfeld. We don't have...
You're talking about Jerry Seinfeld?
I mean the show.
The show, yeah.
We don't have Friends. We don't have movies that are coming out that get people to love Arab culture the way Arabs love American culture in the movies. And
One
so
way
on.
you think that you can tackle this is that you use jokes about IS, the so-called Islamic State,
Yes.
or ISIS,
Yes.
in your repertoire. Is there anything funny
Oh my
about
God. Oh, there's
ISIS?
First of all, comedy is such a powerful weapon in the biggest war going on in the world today, which is the war of narrative. I believe that the biggest war in the world today is narrative. It isn't weapons. Even if you look at IS, the so-called Islamic State, they're winning by pushing an ideology, or losing, but they're basically, their battle is to push an ideology of hatred. It isn't their tactical brilliance, it's their ability to recruit people. Narrative is very powerful. The most powerful weapon in narrative is comedy. If you make a joke out of ISIS, and in my comedy what I do is I show the power of humor, how when 3 ISIS suicide bombers blew themselves up in Lebanon, killed 56 Lebanese people, the next day the Lebanese were making jokes. And that's how Lebanon has handled violence. We make jokes because we don't allow the enemy
But that's
to
jokes
realize.
amongst Lebanese people. But when you tell these kind of jokes
Oh,
to
no,
a
no,
Western audience,
we
so
say
you're
them
not
on
just
TV.
perpetuating the stereotype of, oh, here's an Arab American comedian.
No.
He's talking about acts of terror and terrorists and so on. So you're just perpetuating these
No,
stereotypes.
I'm not. First of all, I'm making it very clear that we are subject to terrorism. When I start telling stories about ISIS blowing people up, it comes up as a surprise that we suffer from it. They thought we were ISIS. So already you're starting to push back against that. And then we're showing the spirit of how Arabs deal with extreme situations. By making jokes, you're showing the enemy that they didn't get to you. That's how you demoralize the enemy.
The families of the victims of ISIS and all their, atrocious acts, far too many
Yes.
to mention, the
Yeah.
wanton killing, the sexual
course.
exploitation of girls
Of
and
course.
women and so on and so forth. I mean, do you really think that the families of these victims, if they heard your jokes, would think they were funny?
Yeah. Because I know the families of victims in Lebanon have helped me write these jokes by telling me some of the jokes themselves. My show is Love Isn't the Answer, my latest show, is 2 hours long. The ISIS joke is just a few minutes. So it's not the entirety of the show.
No, it's not. But I mean,
it's part of an overall message.
But you know, look, Joan Rivers said that soon after the tragedy of 9/11, she started making jokes about the 3,000 widows who'd lost their husbands in the attack. And she said after she made that joke, she was spat at on the street, and she didn't work for years.
I've never made jokes about the victims. I've made jokes about the violent people, the ISIS. So for us, the jokes and obviously,
well, she talked about the families of the victims.
It would help if somebody were to hear the joke, but the joke and the context of it is how we made fun of ISIS by making them the joke.
So like they're wearing flip-flops and they're fighting and that kind of thing. But that makes them seem weak, and they're not. I mean, they may have lost the caliphate, but
are they not weak?
They've lost the caliphate, but
they
they're
lost
still
the caliphate.
around.
They weren't able to come into Lebanon. They weren't able to come into Lebanon. And Lebanon is a very weak country.
So you think jokes about ISIS can actually help defeat them genuinely?
It helped in Lebanon.
Is there any subject you wouldn't joke about? Because, I mean, there's a lot of debate, isn't there? I mean, about how, you know, the red lines and so on. Would you joke, for example, about the prophets of Islam?
No, I wouldn't. Why would I do that? There's no joke.
Whether you have any lines.
I don't, no.
You draw.
For me, I draw the line on if a joke only works if it's clever and it's funny and it provides some kind of perspective. I'm not out to do shock comedy. You know, there's a lot of comedians today that'll make jokes about religion or whatever, and they're like, you know, I don't care if you get offended, because for me, I care that I want you to get my message. At the end of the day, I'm trying to unite people and bring people together. So it's not in my interest to do jokes that paint anyone in a negative light.
So you don't want to offend anybody?
I don't want to offend somebody for the sake of offending somebody.
Right.
Right?
Because you know the British comedian Ricky Gervais has said, offence is never given, it's taken.
Yeah, and he also said if you're offended, doesn't mean you're right.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, I'm never going to talk about another comedian and how they do their jokes. But what I agree with Ricky Gervais is, as comedians, when we put our material out there, it's for the people to take it or leave it, right? And if people get offended and you're a comic who likes to offend people, I guess that's your modus operandi. But for me, it's very important that we push people towards a certain goal. I think political correctness has been a bit overstated. I haven't had a problem with political correctness, because when I've gone into situations, I found that maybe I should reword the joke a bit differently to get the point across. If there is a point to a joke, you're good. But if you're just making the joke, like you asked me if I make fun of the Prophet Muhammad, or let's say Jesus, or any religious figure. I was in a show in Qatar recently where a comedian made jokes about Jesus, and the crowd was shut down. And he came up to me after the show and he said, I thought Qatar was Muslim. Why weren't they laughing? And I said, it's not because they're they just don't want you to make fun of people's faiths, because that's something sacred.
Well, Jesus is also a principal prophet for the Muslims.
Of course. But in this particular comedian's ignorance, he thought that, oh, they're Muslim, I make jokes about Jesus, still applies.
So this kind of, you say that, you know, you mentioned political correctness now, and there is a debate, as I said, amongst comedians. Jerry Seinfeld, for example, told the BBC, the American comedian, that college audiences have become too quick to condemn a joke as racist or sexist.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I haven't had that experience. Personally, I haven't. I don't know.
Maybe your jokes are just too safe, Nemr.
I highly doubt it. My material is very controversial, but the subject matters I deal with are stuff that people completely shy away from. However, I just have a way of dealing with it that, you know, I've done shows at many universities. I've done shows all over the world. I think because my purpose isn't to get the laugh. My purpose is to get the laugh with the point across. That I'm always hypersensitive to, if it's not working, why isn't it working? I don't like to push my views on people. I want people to accept my views. If you laugh at something that I'm challenging you with and I just convinced you, that's my ultimate goal.
So I mean,
that's the power of comedy.
Another comedian, Nish Kumar from Comedy Central, believes that an audience's outrage is sometimes justified. He says, I don't think it's a bad thing for comics to consider the impact of the words they're choosing, and I don't think it's killing comedy.
I agree.
So is political correctness limiting?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
Has his career suffered?
Yeah.
It hasn't. You know, comics who are worth anything. Look, when you get into any controversy and there's political correctness, this discussion you and I just had about IS. You might see something one way, I might see something the other way, but it's not going to hurt my career, because if you're doing it for a specific purpose and you do it long enough, people start to get what you're about. Political correctness, in my case, has caused me to take some words out of my act and to actually come up with even newer jokes to kind of help facilitate somebody getting something across without them having a preordained
Can you think of an example to illustrate that?
In terms of a word, I used to say a word when I had a joke where I would say, and my friend came in and he was retarded. That's what I would say, but his thinking was retarded. Coming from Lebanon, retarded is a word from French, retardé, which means late. It doesn't have the same context of mentally challenged. I used it in America when I was doing shows there when I had just gone back. And somebody messaged me afterwards and said, hey, I don't like you using that word. And I loved your show, but had to walk out. I was like, why? And to me, I was like, you walked out? Why? Tell me why. We had a dialogue. And they worked with associations. They explained to me the use of the word. And I stopped using it. Wasn't necessary for my humor. Why would I want to use the word?
Schizophrenic is another one that people just use.
I never used that, but instead of retarded, I said what I was trying to say, which was this guy was really stupid.
So that was how you changed your...
I mean, that didn't hurt my act at all.
Yeah.
And in other cases where I felt that I needed to get a joke across, I have the joke, I used to say a word, pussy. So I'd say stop being a pussy in my show. And that word carries connotations with it. The reason that for me it's fine saying it is I understand the origin of the word, which is it comes from the word pusillanimous, which was a word that originated in the 16th century, which means he of little courage and little faith. It was shortened to P-U-S-S-I, but now it's become bastardized. The fact that when I said it on stage got a negative reaction caused me to write a joke where I take a deep breath and I explain the whole context of pusillanimous, and then I ended by saying, and then people start applauding, and then I ended by saying, you know, let it be known that an Arab man brought the pussy back to America. Donald Trump tried to take it away, but I'm bringing it back. And if that isn't a reason to have immigrants in your country, I don't know what is. And that joke gets a resounding applause.
You're so grateful to the word pusillanimous.
What I'm trying to say is, had it not been for the politically correct reaction that I got, but because my intent was for people to enjoy the show, I was like, I need to find a way to either make this enjoyable or I'm going to have to cut it out. So it made me a better comic.
There's a way of limiting yourself, self-censorship, as it were, for political correctness and not using offensive words like
didn't see it as
retarded or schizophrenic or whatever.
There are things you have to, I mean, you got to be a mature adult. Sure. You have to be educated. If there's a word that you're using that isn't necessary to the joke and your intention wasn't to offend, and it turns out it's part of some other, it's not my fault that...
No, but there's also, I mean, comedians limit themselves in other ways for different reasons because of censorship, self-censorship, which is a different thing. Now, you perform all over the world, including Saudi Arabia. You were there as a legal stand-up comedian last year.
Yeah, and illegal shows, the first shows ever in Saudi Arabia.
But then last year, to a mixed audience, you said it's wonderful to come back and see huge progress like that. It's testament to how powerful it can be when people can come together and when stand-up comedy rises to its maximum potential. So huge plaudits there from you for performing in Saudi Arabia, but you don't say everything you want to in Saudi Arabia, do you?
Oh my goodness, no.
No.
In Saudi Arabia, what's interesting, and I found to navigate the Arab world, stay away from religion, which I already do, and politics, meaning the king and of whichever country you're going to.
The king and his heirs, the crown prince.
Yeah, and then you can say anything you want.
But why accept that kind of censorship? Because, I mean, you performing in America, you can say what you want to about
As an Arab, I find it disrespectful to go into another country and to challenge their...
But you're an Arab going into an Arab country, and you were talking about the uniformity of Arab culture just
But how boring is it to talk about politics and religion? It's the most easy, made up, done over subject in comedy. It's a simple scapegoat. You take a certain person and you talk about what they do wrong. It's much more difficult to talk about the society that is allowing these people to be in power, that is allowing this kind of behavior to continue. And I deal with the society. I think if you want, when you want...
You're giving a very elaborate answer to basically the fact that you can't say what you want to say in certain countries in the Arab world, like
because
Saudi
if I'm
Arabia,
in Saudi Arabia,
because you'd be arrested.
No, I don't care about being arrested. The religious police tried. I did the first show ever in Saudi Arabia of stand-up comedy. I did 14 illegal shows in Jeddah, Riyadh, and Khubar before the legal thing happened. I helped bring that legal position.
There was a fatwa issued against you.
When I did the legal show, there was a fatwa against me. The reason that I do play by those rules is as I continue to slowly push the envelope with every show that I do, I have a responsibility towards the crowd. If I were to do a show where I was to insult the king, it's not my life that's in jeopardy. I'm an American citizen. I'd just be kicked out of the country. It's the people in the show that are in jeopardy. So I need to be careful, and I have to consider, as a pioneer, as somebody who's taking the stand-up comedy scene single-handedly on his shoulders, I have to craft my way to getting it. When I first started doing shows in Jordan, and to now doing shows in Jordan, what I can say and can't say is not only very different, but other comedians can now speak about.
But isn't that a matter of regret for you? I mean, the Iranian-American comedian Maz Jobrani says, I make the point that the reason I criticise the government here in the United States is because we can.
Yeah.
That's why my family came from Iran to America, so we can do that. We have freedom of speech. You don't have that in so many Arab countries, do you? And that's, sure, it must be a matter of regret to you.
Not really, because I don't. It's definitely a matter of regret, freedom of speech, not being. Well, forget comedy. I mean, just in general.
Butter. That's your job.
Not really, because I always find even political humor in America is cheap. It's dated. It's got a timestamp. If I make a Trump joke today and he doesn't get reelected, I can never do that joke again. But if I do a joke about
But you make Trump jokes, don't you?
No.
Because you can't. I thought you said you don't go much into American jokes, but you said you've got a joke about why some Arab Americans favour Trump. It's because they're tired of their relatives
visiting from overseas, coming in from overseas. That's what I call a throwaway joke. That's like something that is fun and relevant right now, but my act doesn't center around that. That's a throwaway joke because it's fun to know that everybody expects me, as soon as I say Donald Trump, to have this kind of joke, and you come with something else. What I like to do is, so when you're making fun of Donald Trump, what are you making fun of? You're making fun of the bigotry, the racism, and the things that are coming out. What I do is I take the name Donald Trump out of the joke, and I keep everything else in. So even if I go to any country in the Middle East, that's how I do it. Because I'm more concerned with navigating the culture of the people than navigating the culture of a dictator who's there because they got an army on their side. I don't care. It doesn't bring anything to the people.
We're now seeing comedy festivals, aren't we, now, across the Arab world, in Dubai, in Jordan, there have been comedy festivals, and you say you're proud now of comedy in the Middle East and how it's a release for young people to kind of vent their frustrations. But is that desirable, really, as an outlet? Shouldn't they be channeling their energies into venting their frustration in a political way through activism so that they can effect the kind of changes that they want to see? You're serving as a conduit.
That's an outstandingly good question. When stand-up comedy started in America to become more of a formal art form, it started with a comic called Lenny Bruce. And Lenny Bruce was pretty much...
He was a Jewish comedian. He died in the mid-1960s.
Committed suicide. And he was outlawed to perform in any city or state in America except for San Francisco because of censorship, because he would speak truth to power. And when Lenny Bruce came and he was taken to court and stripped of everything, and he ended up killing himself, it was so tragic. But he started pushing that envelope forward. And after Lenny Bruce, we had George Carlin. After George Carlin, there was Richard Pryor. And after Richard Pryor, you had
kind of
Bill
a
Hicks.
freestyle and
you started to
crystal form of comedy.
And to realize today that comedy is a very powerful form of activism. And in the Middle East, it's such an infantile scene that started in 1999 with one kid in AUB in Beirut. And it's
the American University.
University Beirut. I apologize for not clarifying. And you have, from that, in the past 19, 20 years, you now have comedy clubs. You have people expressing themselves. You have a very healthy way of expression, uniting people of all religious backgrounds in the Middle East, bringing Christians, Muslims, and Jews in some cases in the same place, laughing together. If that's not activism, I don't know what is. And yes, it's not at its peak. And yes, we have free speech issues. But 20 years ago, the free speech issues we have are much less than now, and that's because of stand-up. Because if we don't get out there and we don't work and we don't try to improve the situation, it's never going to change.
So finally...
So it sucks for me, but we got to do what we got to do. Roll up the sleeves and jump on in.
So finally, for you, comedy can change the world, build bridges between different peoples, and also help bring about change within countries.
Can I tell you how in a very simple way? If I were to put an American and an Arab in one room together, a bunch of Americans, Asians, African Americans, Arab Americans, from all different backgrounds, Syrians, Sudanese, everyone in one room, and they're all laughing at the same joke. What does that say? They're a lot more similar than they were led to believe. And when they leave that room, after laughing together, it's going to be harder for them to be at odds with each other. When I did my last special, No Bombing in Beirut, what I did with that special, very simply, was film it in Lebanon, Los Angeles, but I didn't reveal that I was cutting between the two shows. I wore the same outfit, and everybody thought it was one show, and that was the whole point. It's the same energy.
Nemr Abu Nassar, thank you very much indeed for coming on HARDtalk.
This was so great. Thank you.
Thank you.